Welcome to A Story Apothecary, a podcast filled with medicinal and healing stories. My name is Nana Timova, and I'm a storyteller and a pharmacist, and stories are medicines which I dispense. In this podcast, you will find my prescriptions of stories for the body, mind, heart and soul. So I invite you to join me as we enter the healing world of stories together. Hello everyone, so lovely to be here. It's been a while since I recorded an episode. We're now in October and I think the last one was about perhaps 4 to 6 weeks ago. So I feel like so much has happened in the meantime. I went to see some family, which was wonderful. I went on a women's retreat led by my mentor Natasha from the Art of Rewilding, which was just so wonderful and so restoring and creative and very much in touch with nature. And I saw so many sunrises there and did yoga in the morning, led by Lotta, who also led the retreat, co-led the retreat with Natasha, and it was just fantastic. And I came back really restored and really energized, and then I kept waking up to see sunrises again for a little while. And as you know, things tend to go back a little bit the way they were, but I kept some of my practices, and so I've been reconnecting in nature. And my friend and mentor Natasha left a beautiful hand drum here to safekeep for a little while she goes and leads vision quests. So I am so excited to play around with it. It's just so much fun. So I thought I'd bring it on the podcast. And I'm just gonna play like a child, and I hope what I make pleases your ears. So the story I picked for today is one that I forgot that I knew, but I love it. I love this story. I heard it from a couple of storytellers, quite famous storytellers, a few years back. So the first one is Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who you may have heard of. She wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves. And this story features in one of her other books. And it also features in the book by Sharon Blackie, If Women Rose Rooted. And the versions are slightly different, but I love this story. It's about the moon, Mother Moon. And I thought I'd pick this story because the moon is so significant and it's so beautiful and it's wonderful to see her rise. I saw the moon rise on the 1st of October, which was a full moon, and on the 31st of October, on the last day of the month, it's also our first moon. So we have a month of 2 full moons. So the first full moon of October was the harvest moon. And the harvest moon is known to be the harvest moon because that's when it appeared when the crops were harvested. And then the hunter's moon is the 31st of October, or the blood moon as well. So you may have heard of something called a blue moon, and you may know that a blue moon is when a month has 2 moons, which are full, and the second full moon is referred to as the blue moon, and that's the one that's coming up in a week or so. Yeah. So the harvest moon is the one which is the closest to the autumn equinox, and it's not always in October, sometimes it's in September. And as you can imagine, a full moon during this time is so precious because it provides extra light for the farmers and the people of the earth and the fields who bring in the crops. And the second moon, the hunter's moon, also known as a blood moon, is named in praise of its rays, for it creates perfect hunting conditions. When hunting for animals such as the deer, which are some of my dearest animals actually, so it makes me sad to think about them being hunted. But it was how our ancestors used to survive, by hunting and foraging, just for what they needed. And so the moonlight was a gift to them and provided them with food and the ability to survive. So if you're listening to this in October, as I'm recording, we are in autumn in the Northern Hemisphere, and I've been loving going out for walks and seeing the shades change from green to yellow to orange to brown. Sometimes it's a deep grey, some leaves are deep bluish grey. And the squirrels, they're having a feast on all the nuts, and there's deer. It took a long time and I didn't see any deer from having some majestic experiences with deer a few years ago. I saw none, and then I've seen some again in the last few weeks, and it's been so wonderful. I can see their prints in the mud in the beautiful woodlands where I go, the secret woodlands. And the acorns falling down from the majestic oak tree, and the hornbeam in the forest where I go with its twisted, beautiful, smooth bark and its glorious leaves, and the huge beeches, and the very feminine silver birches with its white bark and the leaves they're releasing, and the hedgerow as well. It's so colourful. You have the communal wise grandmother rose hips, and you have the sloe berries, which are now juicy, quite astringent, and they'll suck up all your saliva from your mouth if you have them. They're kind of really bitter, but they make really good sloe gin. So I'm cooking some up this year. And the hawthorn with its red berries, which are just so lovely to see. And I'm trying some hawthorn gin for the first time. I'll let you know in a few months how it goes. And it's so lovely to see. I'm really enjoying the purple and red and orange and yellow colours of the autumn, and the sunsets have been magnificent. And so have the moonrises. And I'd like to welcome the story for today about the moon, the mother moon. And I'm releasing this on the day of the new moon, so there hasn't been a moon in the sky visible the last couple of nights. But as you'll hear in the story, she's always there. Still to this day, there are bogs, peat bogs. If you're not careful when you step, you will fall and you will sink. And those bogs in the north of England, well, they exist now, but they existed then too. And then they were even darker. and they were full with dark things and shadowing creatures and horrors and things which were horrible and wet and slimy, and they'd reach your leg and they'd grab it and they'd drag it underground, and you were dragged all the way up until your mouth and you couldn't breathe. And you can still find people preserved in bogs from hundreds of years ago. And this tale, it occurs in this bog land, where those slimy and suckling things, the bogies and the darkness, live and reside. And people knew, and people were scared, or how they were frightened, but they had to go through the land to get from place to place. There was no other way around it. There wasn't bridges and there wasn't anything like that. They had to go through the land. And it would be okay when the moon was shining. When the moon was full, she would light everything and people would know which bogs to avoid and to go round them. But when it was a new moon and it was full darkness, well then, it would be then that people would slide down and drown slowly in the thick, slimy, stinky bogs full of evil creatures. The moon, she was filled with sorrow, and so she did what she could do. She decided to come to Earth and see what was happening with her own eyes. And so when the darkness came, that dark part of the month, she stepped and she landed, slowly landed on the earth, in that place, in that dark place at the edge of the bogs. She came in disguise. She did not want to be seen. She did not want to be heard, and so she wore this dark black cloak around her. She pulled it tightly, and those bogs, the surface of them were like black mirrors, and she looked, as you could see on the side of her face, there was a thin light protruding. And so she pulled her cloak even more tightly until nothing could be seen and she could walk. She was scared, of course, and trembling, like any of us would, but with a heart full of love, she went forth. And she began looking, investigating and thinking, filled with curiosity and sorrow. And out of her cloak, underneath, there was a ray of golden light which showed the path in the complete darkness. Here and there was some vegetation, perhaps a little willow tree, or some ferns, or the beautiful heather you get in those parts. She went past the dark ponds and the deep pools. And just as she was thinking that she had the lay of the land, all of a sudden she felt a vine across her ankles, and it tightened and it tightened. She began to tumble in, and she tried to steady herself and grabbed a gorse bush, but she'd never touched a gorse before, and it was prickly, and so she let go and she tumbled and tumbled, and that vine, it kept sending tendrils around her wrist and her ankles, holding her tightly and tightly. the more she struggled, the more tight that vine held her. And there she was, slipping into the bog in the darkness of dark nights, shivering and straining and fighting. But there was nothing that she could do. And so she fell and looked. She looked up at the sky, her home, trembling, and all she could see were shadows, and all she could hear were shifting things and creeping creatures of darkness and shadows coming towards her, making throaty, earthly, dark, deep sounds that would send shivers down your spine. And that vine, it held her tight. She wondered, what could she do? And as she lay there thinking and pondering, in the darkness from afar, she was sure she heard something. And so she listened carefully. And there was a calling in an old voice from the distance. Help! Help me, please! She heard the plea, and she listened, and the cry came nearer and nearer. Help! It said help, and she heard the footsteps stumbling. A man, she could make out. A man with fright in his eyes. She heard him slipping and floundering along, and she knew that if he walked further, he would walk to his own death, for he would drown, and that is for certain. And so she fought and fought to free herself from the vine that had wrapped herself around, and from the bog that she was half under. And she fought, and she pulled, and she pushed, and she fought so hard, and that hood that had tightened around her face, it pulled back, and her glorious long white hair shone. It shone as bright as the moon that she was. And that man, he cried with joy, and he walked towards the light, and she panicked, for she knew that she was attracting him to where he would drown, to the bog, to the heart of the bog. But the more he walked, the more he saw that actually this was not the place. And the more that she shone, the more of the dark things who despise the light hid underneath the bogs and under the sliminess and griminess. And so he turned, and with brisk footsteps made his way home. He was in such a hurry to get back home to his house and to his family that he didn't think, what was the source of this bright light? He didn't look down to the brave Mother Moon, who was so glad to see him safely back on his path, that she forgot to call out for help. And oh, Mother Moon, glad but exhausted, she fell into the mud. And as she did, her head fell onto her breast, and that hood, it fell back over her hair and over her face, and all became darkness once more. In those creatures They're slimy, dark creatures, but they love the darkness of the night. And they came whispering to each other and saying, "We'll get her now. Now we have her. Now we'll drown her. We have her now. Now we kill her." And they gathered around Mother Moon, and they snarled and barked and growled and kicked and grasped and shoved, and they drove her underground, and they drove her further and further and further. And those dark things, the ones that hate people, the ones that hate all sorts of light, she was their enemy. She provided the light. She was the one that drove them into the dark corners. She kept them from doing their work into their hills, their work of dragging people deep underground. And so miserable was old Mother Moon, and so helpless. She gave up, and she remained limp. In that dark place. And the dark things, well, they fought and they squabbled about what should they do with her. How should they dispose of her? How should they kill her? How should they torture her? What should they do? And they quabbled for such a long time that when they saw there was a deep, dark light rising from the east, and they were running out of time, dawn was breaking. And they needed to do what they needed to do. So all at once they caught hold of the moon and shoved her even deeper into that pool, and two giant boggles went round and found a huge heavy rock, and they rolled it on top of her. And they pushed hard and deep to ensure that it was too heavy for her to rise up again, and they went round and round and pushed all the edges so that no light would escape from any corners, and there is where they laid the moon, buried deep inside the bog. No hope for help. And the days, they passed. 1 week passed. 2 weeks passed, and you would expect to see some light in the sky. The moon. The waxing of the moon. It wasn't there. And the full moon, well, she didn't arrive. And there was no light, and there was no guide. And so many people became lost in those marshes and those bogs. And many children were left with no parents. And there was so much suffering. And so the villagers got together in a council one night, and they decided they needed to do something. They needed to find the moon. Their Mother Moon, they needed to find her. And they had fire and torches, and they tracked through the night onto the bog, looking and looking. Sinking down into that wet, slimy grass. That bog territory went up all the way into their knees. The cold entered their bones, but still they carried on. The evil things, they surrounded them. They waited joyfully, full of glee, clawing at them, pulling at them, whispering at them. But the torches and the flames from the fires they carried, they kept on safe. And the man that night, he remembered. Being in that place, he remembered a light that had come from the bog, and he led them. He led the women and the men that were there into that place, and they looked, and they saw a big boulder. And they asked each other, do you remember this boulder being here? And nobody could remember this huge rock. It was out of place. And they looked closely, they bent, and as they looked, they saw it was almost as if there was a slight lip of light on the edges of the rock. Just a light as thin as a strand of hair. And so with a great excitement they looked towards that big boulder, and they all got together, the men and the women, and they struggled and they pushed that boulder out of the way until it rolled away. And then the light that came forth was so bright, it was almost blinding, and from underneath that rock they saw the most beautiful face they had ever seen. And they saw the most beautiful eyes they had ever looked into, filled with love for all humanity. And that light rose up, lighting their faces from beneath and then straight, and finally the top of their heads and their hairs as Mother Moon escaped from that prison where the dark things put her. And she went and climbed that staircase back into the sky. And there, when they looked up, they could see her shining down at them, bright and beautiful and generous and kind and caring, with her radiant light everywhere. And those bogs paths on the night of the full moon, as clear as day, and people know they can walk safely through them. And on the nights of the new moon, where she rests up into the sky, where she veils herself in her black cloak again, the travellers know they have learned to stay by the hearth and wait until the waxing moon grows full again, until she shines in the heavens once more and shows them the way home. I absolutely love that story of the Mother Moon. There's something so symbolic about it, of the light that she provides. And there are many things that this story could be about, and for this one I don't really wish to sit here and tell you the meaning of the story. It's so rich, and I think it can be so personable in so many levels. And to tell you what the story is about could be quite reductionist. I will say a couple of things though. It seems to me that light and darkness, a time for walking, a time for being out in the world, and a time for darkness, a time of resting and staying by the hearth. There's something really wise about that. The cycles that we all have of play and being out there and rest and recharge. And that cyclical nature of the moon, which many women are familiar with. So important. So I'd like to leave you with these thoughts from the story of the Mother Moon. And may you see many full moons, or moons in their waxing and waning stages. They are so beautiful. A few weeks ago I saw the setting moon. It was a waning setting moon against the pink and purple sky of the rising sun. It was majestic, and I hope that you can experience similar views of moons and light among the darkness. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have. I really enjoy recording them, although they take a lot of work. And for every half an hour of an episode, about 6 hours of work gets put in, from researching the story to learning and working with the story to recording and editing and releasing the episode and all the work that comes after that. So if you've gotten something from this story medicine, then some of the things you can do to say thank you is to leave me a review, or you can buy me a coffee. So there's a link in the show notes which tells you how you can buy me a coffee, and I'll gladly receive it. Or you can become my Patreon, and through the monthly subscription you can get extra content of audio stories, nature folklore, and video stories, and also videos of me sharing my own poetry. And thank you very much to In Feathers, who produces the music for this podcast. Until next time, may you walk in the light of the full moon. Goodbye from me. Thank you for joining me in the Story Apothecary for healing and medicinal stories. I hope we'll meet again. Until next time.